Astrology is a very controversial subject. There are many people who consider it a pseudo-science, and there is also an equally large number of people who consider it a legitimate subscience within esotericism. Well, one of the best ways to prove the legitimacy of something like astrology, which is often viewed as an irrational subject by secularists, is to refer to scientific studies, of course. When it comes to understanding the different kinds of speech tendencies and behavioral disorders that have become increasingly common over the decades, we can gain a significant insight by analyzing our astrology and recognizing the psychological makeup that we carry. Many psychologists are not familiar with what are known as the four elements of nature taught in both Eastern and Western mysticism. Most of us have heard of them from somewhere, either from a TV show or movie, mentioned as a group of four basic elements: earth, water, air, and fire, working together in a mystical context. But we usually just disregard it as occult superstition. In Eastern religions, these four elements are called skandhas or tatvas, and they make up everything that exists in the universe, including the content of our psyche. The sun and moon signs have direct influence over the personality, whereas all the other planets and affiliate signs are responsible for the other aspects of our life, such as romance, communication, finance, luck and abundance, past life karma, and so on. They do not contain intrinsic personality traits, but of course, having a major influence over us, they can indirectly shape our personality over time as we go through life and accumulate experiences. So I'm going to start this speech tendency behavioral disorder breakdown with a common condition that youth are getting diagnosed with everywhere these days, which is autism and Asperger's. Most people with Asperger's have a couple or more of these common symptoms. Now, the question is, why do some people have one particular set of characteristics and other people share a different set of symptoms? This is where many psychologists are stuck these days. Well, the answer is in the person's astrology and natural elements of their psyche. You see, some of these symptoms occur because of psychological elements that are feminine, and other symptoms originate from psychological elements that are masculine. But in every person, you will find a mixture or ratio between feminine and masculine energy in their psyche. The feminine elements are earth and water. The masculine elements are air and fire. Looking at this chart in particular, I can tell you that, according to statistics, the characteristics masters of routine and persistence usually come from feminine earth energy. The reason why these traits are earthy is because earth is a highly focused, practical, and organized element. When out of balance and accentuated, these characteristics turn into stubbornness, materialism, sometimes accompanied by isolation, and inflexibility in thinking and routine. As for the tendency to be fascinated with art and philosophy or other intellectualism, being more materialistic, earth signs tend to pursue aesthetic visual art, and water signs tend to investigate philosophy or pursue conceptual and more abstract forms of art like abstract expressionism and so on. There tends to be such an intense interest in just one or two specific hobbies. That trait is not shown on this chart, but it tends to show up, that these talented individuals prefer to spend most of their time alone with either their material goods or their projects and crafts. The preference to be alone much of the time often leads to speech differences or impediments like lisping, slurred speech, unusual and unique pronunciation of words, and the inability to speak up and express oneself. For Earth-dominant people, autistic speech may sound hard, as though their pronunciation is being forced, or they may sound choppy and stiff. Oftentimes you can sense the attachment that they have when they're explaining something. When they're grasping onto an idea or statement, they repeat themselves redundantly. Water-dominant people are inclined to developing lisps and slurring their speech. They're usually not inclined to precise pronunciation of words, as with earth signs. So their pronunciation tends to sound soft and relaxed, but less defined. With some water autists, their words blend into one another seamlessly. Both earth and water signs tend to sound monotone and are reticent, or quiet. The other Asperger's characteristics come from both earth and water elements. In fact, for the most part, Asperger's and autism are feminine behavior imbalances. In terms of astrology, this means that an abundance of earth signs or water signs can cause these symptoms. The water signs are Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces, and the earth signs are Taurus, Capricorn, and Virgo. Virgo and Scorpio are almost the same in their overall design, except that they belong to different natural elements. These two signs are the most detail-oriented, and consequently, they struggle the most when it comes to prioritizing through details and seeing things clearly without exaggeration. Being too detail-oriented almost always results in perfectionism, overthinking, and exaggerated perception. Being a perfectionist makes relationships very confusing and painful. These people try to keep everything just right, and when small problems arise, they panic, they get insecure, and they overthink out of paranoia. They care too much about what other people think. Scorpio is a water sign, so it's emotional. Scorpio is the most intense and obsessive water sign. Virgo is an earth sign. Earth is rigid, traditionalist, and perfectionist. Both signs have the tendency to obsess over insignificant details and to need to understand how to view things in a more moderate and reasonable way. To not create extreme points of view out of emotion or the fascination with perfection. In other words, to not take everything so seriously. The rest of the feminine signs have a similar nature, but are not as extreme. Regarding obsessive-compulsive disorder, this is more of a phenomenon of the earth element, since earth is organized, perfectionist, and physically inclined. These are people who constantly have the urge to repeat habits involving organizing, labeling, physical mechanical processes, and in other cases, superstition. Now let's move on to the speech disposition chart. This chart is demonstrating the speaking nature of the zodiac signs as well as common speech and behavior disorders. The zodiac signs are divided by the 4 elements as well as their intrinsic genders, with feminine signs found at the bottom of the chart and masculine signs placed near the top. The speech tendencies, outspoken and underspoken, are labeled on the upper and lower parts of the chart. The zodiac signs are arranged in a vertical manner, starting from cautious, withheld, and reticent, and leading to outspoken and imposing. If you may have noticed, Libra is the only air sign found at the bottom of the chart, with the other cautious and reticent signs, because Libra is the only masculine sign that shares this similar nature. What we know as autism, Asperger's, and other disorders like OCD, Tourette's, and ADD are in fact byproducts of these masculine and feminine psychological energies. When we're born with an overabundance of a particular energy and element, we can have strong and noticeable symptoms during youth and adolescence. ADD is somewhat more of a masculine disorder, and Tourette's is an even more masculine disorder, since masculine energy is very active, restless, passionate, and impulsive. Overactivity leads to multitasking, multitasking leads to distraction, and then getting distracted becomes a habit, so we call it ADD. Astrologically, the human psyche is divided into 2 primary aspects, a minor aspect, and fraction sections that tend to occur during conception. The 2 primary aspects are the sun sign, the sign that people are usually referring to when they say that I'm a this or that sign, and the moon sign, which makes up the entire subconscious mind. The ascendant is the minor aspect. It's the degree at which the sun rises or sets during birth. The ascendant or rising sign is minor, as it only has about a 10 or 15% influence over our personality traits. And finally, these aspects tend to form in a divided or fractioned manner, which results in the appearance of a few more zodiac signs. So for example, if you were born on January 4th, 1995, your sun sign wouldn't share any significant fraction of itself with any other sign, since the 4th of any month is approximately where a zodiac sign is at its strongest point, without influence from other signs in the spectrum. At the same time, your moon sign in this case would show up as 28 degrees Aquarius. And since there are 30 degrees for each sign to travel through, this would mean that your moon sign is 2 degrees away from the next zodiac sign, making it a fraction between Aquarius and Pisces. This moon sign example is a cusp, because the two fraction signs are very close to each other. In the two astrological natal pie chart examples above, the combination and amounts of zodiacal energies carry the likelihood to oppose the typical personality traits of the sun sign, the sign that most people are familiar with. The moon signs and ascendants of these natal charts carry opposing traits to the sun sign. To clarify, among the outspoken masculine signs, Libra is the only masculine sign that is predisposed to be very quiet, reticent, very cautious, and very underspoken, due to the nature of making careful judgments before they speak, and the habit of compromising, since Libra is the sign of balance and compromise. So they tend to let other people speak more than themselves. However, a person who claims to be a Libra, but who also has the controlling and somewhat commanding Scorpio as their cusp, as well as a very outspoken, quick-witted Aquarius ascendant, and finally, a very direct, reactive, aggressive Aries moon sign, will have more balance in their speech habits, resulting in more outspokenness. This is figure 1. And in an equal but opposite circumstance, figure 2 shows someone whose sun sign is very outspoken, Sagittarius, but their cusp sign is the cautious, reticent Capricorn, an earth sign. Their ascendant is another quiet and feminine sign, Pisces, and their moon sign is the very cautious, indecisive, selfless, compromising Libra. This person would be exceptionally reticent and quiet for a Sagittarius. So these are examples of people whose sun signs are not behaving as most people would expect in astrology. These are examples of people who seem like exceptions to the typical behavior of these sun signs. And that's why people tend to argue and they say, well, I don't believe that people are like their sun signs because so-and-so doesn't seem to demonstrate a lot of traits. They seem more like a Libra or they seem more like a Capricorn. And that's almost always because they have that Capricorn cusp, or they have a Libra moon, or they have those other influences there, maybe a really strong influence in the moon sign. A person can say, well, I'm a Sagittarius. But if they have a Capricorn cusp, and then they have a full spectrum Capricorn moon, the person's a Capricorn.